And is it recording? Can we see that it's doing a thing? Okay, great. No? Can't see anything. Okay, can't see that it's, so it's recording, I've been told. Down? Okay. We're doing okay? Just shout out you're hideous if I fall out of frame or something, okay? Cool. So, this episode's set about illness and dying makes me feel a bunch of things. So, I have been living with HIV for like 11 or 12 years. It's a thing that I should actually know. That's a thing that one should know about their own health, is how long they've had a chronic manageable infection. And I have had a bunch of people that I'm super close to that have died of AIDS-related complications. And it's a thing that gets tricky to kind of hold space for in public conversation. One of the things that happened with a good friend of mine who, actually both of these people died of cancer. You just gonna do that for me? Both. I need you to be close enough though.
Yes.
You can't get so far. Even if you just sit down there.
There we go.
Great, thank you. Not that I have any experience with people around the bedroom or anything. Having had two close friends that were older pause guys who on the death certificate and then all of their families talk about their death as having been from cancer, but they had been long-term survivors of HIV/AIDS for multiple decades. And the thing that I found really frustrating is that we were unable to kind of actually just name their death as being of AIDS. Mostly because of the stigma that the families held about their sons having lived with AIDS to begin with. And then when it was a cancer diagnosis, it in some ways became a blessing to these families because then they didn't have to deal with managing that stigma in a public-facing way. So that was a thing that had pushed me in a bunch of ways to actually think about what it means for me to be a person living with HIV, and also thinking about my own death and kind of where that exists in the future. Hopefully no time soon. I mean, I've got a couple other suites of episodes I'd like to show. I'm hoping that I'm not actually going to die of AIDS this evening, but who's to say? So that was a joke. One of my favorite parts about being a terrible comedian is getting to explain the jokes after they fall completely flat. So one of the ways that I've started to kind of process my own relationship to death, and I think that there's a thing that we as queer people, and in particular those of us who are living with HIV or have people who are living with HIV in our sphere, in our personal sphere, is our relationship to death kind of looks different. And I found this Japanese woodblock print in an art history text that was Skeleton Performing Zazen on the waves, and it's this image of a skeleton in a meditative pose, and in the foreground and the background is these images of waves, beautiful stylistic images of waves. And then that kind of took me down a little rabbit hole of 19th century Japanese woodcut prints from that kind of era. And there's also this series of devotional images, or a genre of devotional images from that time about the 9 stages of decomposition of the corpse. We were going to get dark today. Did we tell you that? Yeah. Yeah, it's assumed. So one of the things that I found really useful for me as an artist was to see this history of reproduction of the macabre, and not just of the macabre, but actual images of decomposition and actual images of bones bleaching and bodies turning to dust, and thinking about the history that I come from, of the white Western art history that I come from, which tends to have a very sanitized representation of death. It's you get someone that's having a pained moment. usually some sort of like Jesus moment of like, ow, this really hurts, but I'm doing this for you, girl, and then it's all over. But like nothing about the relationship of our actual body or corporeality and what that means in community and thinking about like our legacy. And as a person that is not having kids and has decided very intentionally that I don't want to put any of my genetic material into the world, and not just because of my crippling mental illnesses, but also because I just think of the use of resources that I'm not interested in participating in throwing more resource vacuums into the world. But thinking about what it means to have a body that passes through time and space and then leaves essentially becomes nothing and leaves a trace of nothingness. And one of the things that I think we see kind of coming out of queer communities is this relationship to legacy. And I think we see that through drag communities with ball culture and houses. We see that with the HIV response and with these awards and monuments that kind of talk to our legacy and talk to the history of kind of queer people responding to moments of crisis in our lives and responding to those that we have lost in a meaningful, tangible way that's not necessarily about creating family lineages, but it's about finding ways to monumentalize the lives that have passed and do that in a way that speaks to the history that we've lived through, and also the fact that we don't have necessarily, or historically we haven't had these kind of family lineages of making more baby queers to kind of keep on a family name. And how I see the girls kind of playing into this is the tangible relationship to death that we see kind of playing out over and over in this series, not necessarily just in these couple of episodes, but there's a real cult, a real tangible, a real discernible relationship to the specter of death, to this idea, this understanding that death is a part of how we live right now, and death is a part of how we kind of move through the world, and it's something that we, if we are afraid of and keep pretending it's something that's never going to happen to us. Like Sophia talks about how she's like, I'm 93, I never thought this was going to happen. And I think one of the things that's kind of made in jest, that statement's kind of made in jest, but then we see over and over again the girls are kind of reckoning with their corporeal or bodily frailty. And I just think that this series was really one of the first times for me as a queer person where I got to see that fragile or tenuous relationship to death portrayed in a way that felt related and connected to my own experience, even though they're not talking about HIV, they're not talking about queerness, but their vulnerability in naming having a physical body that is finite, that has a limit, is something that I think is really important. Another kind of thing that happens in how we talk about death, and that I think is important for queerness. I don't know if people have heard of the writer Muñoz, the late writer Muñoz, who's a queer theorist who wrote this amazing book where you can get here. He wrote a bunch of amazing books, but one of them was called Cruising Utopia, and it kind of looks at this idea of queerness as something that's always hopeful and forward-looking, and that it's a thing that we have not yet achieved, that we're always looking for the potential. It's it is not yet arrived. And while I think that is so beautiful, I'm just not a hopeful person. I think that the world is often a really terrible place to people that I care about. And I tend to respond better to the author Lee Edelman, who wrote No Future, Queer Theory and the Death Drive. And he's pretty kind of nihilist, and I'm kind of okay with that. But the thing is, so I have tended to self-identify as a cheerful nihilist. I think the way that he talks about nihilism, or the idea that there's actually nothing, not that we shouldn't be looking forward to anything, but he's the thing that queerness gives us, and that I think we also kind of see in the presentness of the girls when they talk about their relationship to death and their temporary bodies, is we see the potential for us to connect right now. And the way that Lee Edelman kind of critiques this idea of utopia or futurity is both the left and the right wing, left wing, right wing politics kind of frame it as we have to do better for the children. We have to do better for the next generation. And what I appreciate about Lee Edelman's critique is he's like, fuck that. Like, queerness is not about the future. Queerness is about how we treat each other right now. And that's like the beautiful potential that we have as queer people, is to be accountable to each other in this moment, and to be accountable to like treat you in this room with care and with love, because this is all that we know that we have, is I have you right here, and I'm so thankful for you right here. And thankful for the girls to kind of remind me that it's this moment, and it's all of you, and I love you. Thank you.
Yeah!